Okay, welcome back. Hopefully that scratching went pretty well for you. We're going to start learning how to apply that concept in a musical manner to open chords. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to make sure that you prep yourself with some basic open chords. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on chords right now because I'm hoping that you know most of these, but I am going to give you the tip of understanding what chords you should be knowing and the essential chords. I call them the essential 10. The essential 10 chords that we use in most pop, folk style of acoustic music. Okay, and those chords are A, C, D, E, F, G, A minor, B minor, D minor, and E minor. So I'm just going to roll through those really quick, and they're going to be in your booklet, so you'll be able to look at those. Okay, so the first thing we've got is an A chord. Now with the A, you generally strum the bottom 5. Okay, you might be using 3 fingers like your first, second, and third. You might be using your second, third, and fourth. You might be using 2 fingers over 3 strings if you have really big fingers. It's fine, okay? Right now we're going to be focusing more on what's happening with the right hand than with the left hand. But just so you know, so you've got your A, you've got yourself a C chord, you know, you might know C9, you know, something like that. C is right like this. Then we've got our D chord, okay, and our E chord, and our F chord. Now, F, for a lot of people, you play that by pressing on the bottom 2 strings at the same time with your first finger. Then your middle finger goes on the second string, and your ring finger goes on the third string, and you just strum the bottom 4. Or you might know the bar chord shape of F, and you could play that. Either one's just fine for what we're doing right now. And then we have G. Might be a 4-finger G, might be a 3-finger G. It's entirely up to you. And then we move on to our minor chords. We have A minor. We have B minor. Okay, and remember, if you don't know all these, you're not trying to keep up with me. I'm just trying to show you what the chords are, and then you can study those. There's not going to be any test on this. Okay, what we're doing is we're just trying to get, I'm going to try and get you all the chords that you're going to need for this realistic playing thing. So B minor. B minor for a lot of people is played by putting your first finger on the first string, 2nd fret, middle finger on the 2nd string, 3rd fret, 3rd finger on the 4th string, 4th fret, and then pinky, on the 3rd string, 4th fret. And then you only strum the bottom 4. Okay? Some of you might be playing that as a bar chord. Okay? 5th string bar chord, which is perfectly fine too. Okay? Moving on, we got D minor. D minor, the saddest of all chords right there. E minor. Okay? So those are our essential 10. Okay? Go through them one more time. A, C, D, E, F, G, that's 6 majors, and then A minor, B minor, D minor, and E minor. That's 4 minor chords. With those chords in a capo, you could play all kinds of different songs out there. So study those. Okay, really practice those hard and develop those. If you're having a really hard time with open chords and you want to know more about how to practice those and things like that, I have another DVD that's available that talks about all these chords and how to develop them and how to practice them and so on. So let's go ahead and move on. We're going to take that scratching idea that you just practiced and we're going to implement that into some of these chords and learn how this works. So the first thing we're going to do here is I want you to make me a G chord. And the reason we're going to use a G chord is because a G uses all 6 strings, so we don't have to be worrying about which strings we should be hitting. We're just going to bash everybody. Okay? So we're making a G chord. You might be making a 3-finger. You might be making a 4-finger. It doesn't make any difference. Whatever's comfortable for you. Okay, so now let's implement this scratching idea into our playing. So now we're going... I'm just strumming a G chord. Then we've got our ups in between. And again, the goal is to feel comfortable about those downs and those ups. Not just strumming down and up. Anybody can strum down and up. What you're trying to do is you're trying to make it feel comfortable to you. You're trying to make it sound comfortable, sound smooth, sound musical, right? Anybody can strum down and anybody can strum up. We're going to learn how to make that sound musical. That's what we're looking for, okay? So what we're going to do first off is we're going to start talking about patternized strumming versus organic strumming. Now, patternized strumming would come from one of two places. Either number one, you're learning how to play a strumming pattern because you're having a difficult time strumming naturally or organically, okay? So let's say, for instance, we're going to play along with some songs. So I have a G chord here, and I start strumming this pattern. Now, can you hear the pattern that I'm playing? And if you can you replicate what I'm doing? Make a G chord, and let's play together, and I want you to play this pattern before I tell you what it is. Okay? 1, 2, ready, go. Now, if that feels comfortable to you, what I'm doing is playing down, 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 up, down, 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 up, down. Now, if we think about this scratching idea, whenever we play songs, a song is just, for 3 minutes, it's just, nothing but down strums all the way through for 3 straight minutes. And then in between those down strums, we have up strums for 3 straight minutes. What we are doing now is instead of just playing all the downs and all the ups, we're taking some of the ups down to create space. So instead of it just going like this for 3 straight minutes and having somebody throw a flower pot at our head, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create some space in between there, okay? So instead of going, I'm going, and I'm creating this strumming pattern. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you a quick story here. When I first started teaching guitar, I had a couple of private students, but what I primarily did was I did group classes. So I just dove right in and I had these group classes at a local music store. So I'd have 20 people in this class and I'm trying to teach them how to do all this stuff. And I'm brand new at learning how to, or teaching guitar and all this. So what I did was I made my own booklet and I put chords in there and pictures of my fingers and blah, blah, blah. And then what I did was I created some strumming patterns for them to go home and practice. Okay, so I have 20 people in this classroom of all ages and they're learning how to play these. So I'm teaching them how to strum, right? So they're making G and they're strumming like we are right now. Which is awesome. And then I'm teaching them how to change chords and it's all coming along and it's working great. Class gets over. I have a few of these students now that want to move on to private lessons. So I'm thinking, wow, this is awesome. So they move on to private lessons. And what I find time and time again, which I figured out, thankfully, at some point, is that a lot of these students had latched on to a certain strumming pattern, and they would play that strumming pattern over and over and over again in every song. Okay, too much of the same strumming pattern. So this is where I started trying to avoid teaching people strumming patterns. Strumming pattern number 1, strumming pattern number 5, strumming pattern number 7. To use the strumming patterns to develop the concept of moving up and down is an awesome idea. But to rely on strumming patterns for every song that you play, the problem is you're not really listening to the song. You're just creating the same pattern over and over and over because it's comfortable for you. So what I want you to understand is there's a big difference between a patternized strum and organic strumming. And that's what I want to talk to you about really quick, okay? So, patternized strum, I'm creating a pattern. Now, do some songs have a strumming pattern? Well, absolutely they do. But more than not, they don't. More than not, when you listen to a song, if that artist, if that musician, that guitar player was sitting in front of you and you asked them, hey, how did you strum that song? Like, what downs and what ups did you play? Most of the time, they're going to look at you and go, I don't know, I just kind of played, just kind of strummed the song. That's what I want you to learn how to do, is to really understand that concept. Okay, so we have strumming patterns that we're going to use to develop that, but then as soon as we get that, we're going to move away from doing that, and we're just going to start learning how to play. So here's what I want you to try and do. You got yourself a G chord again. Okay, what I want you to think about in your head is strumming down and up, and what we're going to do is we're going to add them all in right now, all the downs, all the ups, and then we're just simply going to move away from the strings and keep strumming like I'm doing right now. So watch this. Let me do it first, and then you can do it with me. So here we go. It's going to look like this. And here I go. I'm going going to come back in. Now, I don't want to speed up or slow down. And what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying not to think about when to come in or when to go out. Okay, I'm not trying to create a pattern, and sometimes you have to fight this. Okay, so I want you to do this with me. I'm going to count to 4, and we're going to be doing down, ups, and then I want you to move away and come back in when I say. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. Down, up, down, up, down. Just keep doing that. Now I want you to focus on your elbow. Just keep this motion going the entire time. Now let's move away, but we're going to keep strumming. We're just not going to hit the strings. Now come back in any old time you want. Move away. Come back in. Move away. Come back in. Move away. Come back in. See how I can move away for a long time and come back in? And then maybe I move away just for a little while and I come back in? Or maybe I just move away and come back in right away. See, I can create different space because when I move away, I'm creating obviously empty space, right? We'll call it a rest because the chord is still ringing out. So I'm creating a rest. And then I'm moving back in and I'm creating a strumming pattern. And then I'm moving away. Now the strumming pattern that I'm creating, I'm not aware of what I'm creating. I'm not sitting there thinking down, 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 up, down. I'm just strumming. So the more comfortable I get with this idea of moving out and coming back in, I can do it more frequently like this. Watch. Just whatever. I'm just creating, and I always tell my students it's like playing brainlessly. You're really trying to shut off that logical element of your brain of strumming, you know, again, a pattern. You're just moving in and moving out. Now, maybe when you're moving in and moving out, you do acquire a want to play a certain pattern at a certain point in time. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just if you play that same pattern 55 times in a row, there's something wrong with that. But let's say you're playing and you think dun, 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 da, da, and dun, dun. It's almost like scat singing. You're just thinking rhythms in your head and you're playing them, okay? Or you're listening to a song and you hear a particular rhythm being played, and so you replicate that, right? Think like nana nana boo boo, right? Nana nana boo boo, right? So I'm just going, okay? I'm replicating the pattern that I'm hearing. I'm not thinking about tas and TTs, and I'm not thinking about 1E and a 2E. I'm just strumming bum, 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 bum. I'm just strumming what I'm hearing. Okay, so the first element of learning how to really effectively strum is to learn to feel it, like with scratching. Because then you're not tied to chords. You're not worrying about what chord you're playing and chord moving and all that. You're just getting used to rhythm, for rhythm's sake. Then once you get comfortable with that, we're moving on to this next thing where we're creating some chords, and we're going to move back and forth either by pattern or by playing organically, by moving the hand back and forth. Now, a couple things to think about as you're moving back and forth. One thing is, you don't always have to start with a down strum every time you move away. You don't have to go. Half the fun is coming in on those up strums. Watch. Okay? Those ups are what give it some more groove, as opposed to just playing all the downs all the time. Okay? So I can come in on an up strum, so I missed a down and I came in on an up. I might have missed a bunch of downs and ups, but I came back in on an up strum, which sounds pretty cool. So these are all little tactics that you want to try and practice when you're either scratching or playing a chord. Right now we're playing a G chord. The more chords I play, the more it's going to hinder what's happening with my strumming hand, unless I am really, really good with those chords. If I'm not very good at, let's say, a D chord or whatever chord it might be, an F chord, my brain is going to go right back over there and it's going to have to start concentrating on that chord, which is going to cause this to be less creative. So the goal really is, when you're practicing all of this kind of stuff, is keep your chords and your strumming separate. Practice strumming, practice scratching a lot, and then practice your chords, all the techniques of developing those chords. So when your two hands come together, they're together, but they're still independent. Your strum is just doing its strum. And your chord hand has to keep up with that strum. You have to move. You know, it's got my chording hand has to move with what's happening with my rhythm. I'm not waiting. I'm not going. I don't want to do that. If that's happening, I need to go back to the drawing board and develop my chording hand a little bit to alleviate those problems. Okay? So, pattern versus organic strumming. The second thing we're going to deal with is, even with this patternized or organic strumming, whatever it is that we're doing, we're going to encounter a problem as things get faster. Because as the speed develops, as we move into that twice as fast speed like we were talking about earlier, the technique gets more difficult. It's harder to play. So what I want you to start thinking about now is I want you to think about whether or not, as you're strumming, should you be moving from the elbow or should you be moving from the wrist? Now watch this. I'm going to take that same G chord I've been playing here, and here's some strumming from the elbow. Okay, here's moving from the wrist a bit more. See, as I start trying to get a little faster, I got to use a little more small motion. My wrist, really just shaking my wrist like I'm shaking off some water, shaking my wrist is almost enough to cover all the strings. Maybe it is enough to cover the strings. But if I try and go, okay, it's really hard to sit and, you know, try and pound a nail really, really, really fast like that. So when you're playing slower speeds, it's nice to stay nice and wide. Okay? But when you're playing faster speeds, you might start moving from the wrist a little bit. You don't have to, but it's something to think about a little bit. A lot of players don't really focus on where they're strumming from. They just focus on the fact that they're moving their arm back and forth. So I want you to think about that a little bit. It makes logical sense if you can loosen up in here on your wrist and just simply kind of swing from your wrist. You're not moving as far, and so things are going to be faster as opposed to this much distance. Okay? So just kind of be aware of that when you move into that double time thing, okay, where we convert the downs and the ups to all downs. Okay? So now moving on a little bit, give you another idea. I'm going to add some more chords in now. Okay? I'm going to play G, D, E minor, C. Okay? So I'm going to play G, D, E minor, C. That's going to be my chord progression. G, D, E minor, C. So here I go. So I'm using this kind of strumming thing. I'm moving in and out, right? And we've already figured out that what we can do by strumming in various different places, we're creating what we're going to call a dynamic, an effect. And I'm going to call it the ocean effect. Okay? If you think about an ocean, the waves of an ocean are very unpredictable. They're not all the same size. They don't all move exactly the same way. Things are different. Okay? When you strum in different places, you're strumming this down, but then the next time around you don't strum that down, or you know, whatever the patterns are that you're creating, instead of having just this one prescribed pattern, you're creating different things as you play. Now, do you have to feel obligated to change every single thing every single time? No, you would drive yourself crazy doing something like that. More importantly is, a guitar player I hung out with a long time ago, a famous guitar player, one of the most wise things I learned while I was ever hanging out with people talking about guitar, I asked him once, I said, so when you play, how do you know when to do something else? Like, how do you know when you've been doing it too long? And he goes, well, if it occurs to me that I've been doing it, then I change it. I always thought that was a really simple thing to say, but it made perfect sense. If it occurs to you that you've been doing the same thing, then change it. And you that occurrence might be very quick and it might be very long. It just depends. But think about that a little bit. So as you're playing this and you're strumming, maybe you keep trying to change things up just subtly, right? You just have to keep working with this. So that's how we're going to start creating this ocean concept, okay? Is that we're strumming in different places, so we're creating an element of dynamic. The second dynamic that we have with this chord progression is the way I'm strumming, the pressure I'm using when I hit those strings, and we'll call this volume, right? The hardness that I'm strumming or the softness that I'm strumming. So instead of strumming the whole thing like this, just beating the daylights out of my guitar the entire time, maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to start exploring hitting softer and harder at various places. Again, a very organic concept. So let me do this. Let's say right here, I'm going to bring it up. See, it's that ocean effect, right? I've got this movement, okay? The strumming is in different places, and the dynamic at which I'm hitting those strings is changing, and so everything doesn't sound cookie cutter. Everything doesn't just sound boxed in the same thing over and over and over. You have all of this variety. That's the first and easiest way to make something that you're doing on the instrument sound musical. Because if you remember, that's ultimately our goal, isn't it? It's not how much information we have, it's how well we can use the information that we have. So even if you only know 5 chords, you can know 1,000 chords and still not be able to make good music. It's not that. It's taking what you do know and thinking on a musical level. I always tell my students, for instance, G, the G chord itself, is not a musical element. It's just an element. You could teach anybody how to play a G chord. That doesn't make them a musician. That doesn't mean they're creating music. It means that they've made a G chord. If you ever heard me play piano, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, because I don't have a natural flow to a piano. I'm thinking the whole time when I'm playing. Okay? So what you want to do is get to the point where when you're playing, everything just feels comfortable. Okay? Everything is smooth, and you're thinking about the way it sounds, not just that you're playing, but you're thinking about the way it sounds. What is the listener hearing when you're playing? That's what strumming is all about. That's why this right hand, it's the #1 neglected thing, which should never be, but it always is by people when they first start learning how to play, because they're so excited about chords and learning, a riff and all this. And I get it. I do the same thing. But boy, this is what's going to sell your music when you play, is the idea of being dynamic. Okay. So we've got dynamics in strumming, different rhythms. We've got dynamics in the way we're hitting the strings. And now let me give you some little tips, okay? Let's move on to that same chord progression. Again, G, D, E minor, C. But let's say you're having a hard time remembering when to strum what. Like on a G chord, you strum all 6. On a D chord, you strum 4. On an E minor, you strum 6. On a C chord, you strum 5. And you're thinking, holy crap, how do I remember all this stuff? Well, through practice, you would remember that. But I want you to think of this. There's no law that states that when you make a G chord, you are required by law to strum all 6 strings. When you make a C chord, you are required by law to strum the bottom 5 strings. It doesn't work that way. They're just options. And if you're like most people, unless you're a robot, when you strum, chances are when you strum, you're hitting different strings at different times anyway. Like if you were to take G, D, minor, C, and even take a strumming pattern, the same strumming pattern over and over and over, and you were going to record yourself playing that chord progression with the same strumming pattern 20 times in a row, how many times of those 20 times did you hit exactly the same strings on each chord exactly the same way every time? And the answer would be probably not a lot. When you strum up, it's not like you're hitting, on a D chord, it's not like you're hitting all 4 every time. So instead of being so worried about hitting all the strings exactly the right way every time, and I'm not saying it's not important to learn how to do that, it is, but we're talking about organic playing here, okay? Let's think about it this way. Instead of strumming all 6 strings on a D chord, I'm going to visualize in my head strumming the bottom half of the guitar. I have the top half, I have the bottom half. The top half is always really beefy. The bottom half is always very melodic. And to be honest with you, from a guitar player's perspective, these thin strings are way more important than these thick strings when it comes to melody. Okay? So as I make this G chord, I'm thinking in my head I got to strum everybody, but I don't. I could just try and target my pick towards the bottom half of the guitar. Now there are going to be times that I hit more than the bottom half because I'm human and that's what happens when I'm playing. Okay? When I go to the D chord, now D should only be the bottom 4, which I should be doing pretty good because I'm trying to direct myself towards the bottom half of the guitar. Now E minor comes up. Now for most people, when they make E minor, the first thing they think is, well, I'm on the 5th and 4th strings here, so I have to strum those strings. You don't. You could strum the bottom 4 strings or whatever, the bottom half of the guitar, and it's still going to sound like an E minor chord. Okay? And then C, same thing, bottom half of the guitar. So let me play it for you, and I'm just going to direct my attention and my guitar pick towards the bottom half of the guitar. See? And it sounds just great. So in your head, if you're getting all tied up with which strings you should be strumming, if you visualize your guitar as 2 halves, the top half and the bottom half, just try and target the bottom half most of the time. That's where your melody is going to be, and it's going to clean it up enormously. Because the worst thing you could do with strumming is this. Hammering those top strings. It sounds horrible. So if you think about it, if you weigh the options, you're always better off just staying towards the bottom. Now if you want to open up over a G chord and strum more, go ahead. And then that D chord comes up and you're thinking, whoop, I got to back down, bottom half. E minor, maybe you open up on that one. C comes up, whoop, we're going to bottom half that again. Okay, we're going to be careful. So it's just an option. It's a mental idea for you to start thinking about how you can play more relaxed and more organically and make your music sound really good. If you're hitting the proper strings and you're varietizing your strums and you're varietizing the volume at which you're hitting those strings, you're going to be surprised at how all of a sudden the stuff really does sound like music. Even just basic chord progressions like that. It's great. Okay?